Is Joe Rogan evil or just plain stupid? It's a good question, and some of you might ask, well, why not both? Can't he be both evil and stupid? The answer is yes, but I'm just going to try and suss out which one of them predominates. Either way, he's not a good person at all. Either way, he has harmed this country tremendously. Some political analysts have even pointed out that he may have helped Trump win the election by endorsing him shortly before the election. So he's already damaged this country severely, possibly to the point of no return. But we're going to suss out, is he more evil or is he more of just a low IQ guy? I think some of the evidence that he's evil has come out more recently. Some of the evidence that he's stupid was made more available early on. He brought on Bernie Sanders in August 2019 and kind of just, let the guy speak and was really nice to him like he was with most of his guests. He was nice to Ben Shapiro. He was nice to Milo Yiannopoulos, Matt Walsh, plenty of progressive and conservative people. He would say, yeah, no, let's just talk. Let's just talk. Let's just have a friendly conversation. Let's banter. People will enjoy it. And indeed, people did enjoy it. It got plenty of views, so good for him. But then, all of a sudden, he brings on Bernie Sanders again, this year, 2025, and he grills him about climate change. Joe Rogan uses climate change denial tactics against Bernie Sanders in a discussion. Bernie Sanders says he's really concerned about climate change. Who could blame him? Who could blame him? It's potentially an existential crisis, if we don't handle it. But Joe Rogan's like, no, it hasn't gotten hotter. Joe Rogan also defended Trump. He defended Trump for specifically suing ABC, suing media outlets for editing interviews. Think about that. Nobody's done that before. Nobody's sued a news outlet for an interview with another candidate and how they edited it that way. This is totally unprecedented. But Joe Rogan's like, oh yeah, they made her look gooder. They made her look better. That was bad. And Bernie Sanders like, well, he's using lawfare and that's very problematic. And Joe's like, no, he's allowed to do that. And he was mad because they were running interference for Kamala. So it was a really pathetic show. And for those of you who said, oh, Joe Rogan just brings whoever he wants on and it's a chill time no matter what. Far left, far right, centrist, libertarian, whatever. He's going to bring these guests on. They're just going to have a delightful conversation and it's going to be intriguing to everyone. Well, not so fast, because that Bernie Sanders interview comes along and all of a sudden Joe Rogan gets extremely ass blasted, butthurt by everything that Bernie Sanders says. Basically everything, especially with respect to climate change and the Trump First Amendment free speech issues. So yeah, he's not some guy who just brings people on and acts delightful and chums it up with them. He's bringing on the most left-wing senator in the country and is berating him for not liking Trump and for being concerned about climate change. That is problematic. That is problematic. And for him to say, oh, I'm not a Republican or a Democrat, I'm just an American. You are doing Republican propaganda. You are doing Republican propaganda by grilling Bernie Sanders about that. So that's some evidence that he's evil. I would say more evidence that he's evil actually comes from his treatment of Tim Walz. And I say treatment as though he was doing it to Tim Walz's face. Joe Rogan has not, to my knowledge, talked to Tim Walz. But Joe Rogan has disparaged Tim Walz so heavily. He has talked so much crap about him. He's like, he's a liar, he's a liar, he's a liar. And so he brings up some stuff which wasn't really even lies necessarily. Just, okay, he embellished some things about his military record. Okay. And the ironic thing really about him going after Tim Walz for supposedly being a liar is that Donald Trump, one of his defining characteristics, in addition to being confident and kind of charismatic, is being a good liar. Lying so much, putting out so many lies at just an insane volume. The fact checkers are busting their butts with work, just fact checking this guy. And Tim Walz, it's like, okay, so he had a few things that were kind of dubious, like maybe they were embellishments or something like that. But Joe Rogan goes out there and he's like, wow, what a liar. I can't believe that. I'm so glad this guy's not vice president. And he sort of revealed a couple months ago that Tim Walz was one of the main reasons that he was siding with Trump and siding against Harris's ticket. Absolutely unbelievable, especially because Tim Walz was arguably the more lucrative VP pick for Kamala Harris than Josh Shapiro. Tim Walz actually had progressive policies in a whole host of areas, whereas Josh Shapiro's progressive policies were mostly focused on economics. Josh Shapiro also had some sketchy stuff in his background with respect to a potential murder cover-up in the state of Pennsylvania. Now, I'm not saying he's a bad candidate or he would have been a bad VP choice, but there was some stuff there that was kind of concerning. Tim Walz, on the other hand, he didn't really have any huge scandals in his past at the time Kamala Harris picked him, or really during the campaign. Right-wingers are going to dig up all sorts of mud and try and see what sticks. Now, Joe Rogan did have a good opportunity, actually, to criticize Tim Walz for one thing, and that's something false that he said during the debate. And right-wingers, if you're listening to this, let this be my way of showing you that I'm not just someone who praises the Democrats no matter what, or praises Tim Walz no matter what. Tim Walz misstated First Amendment law at the vice presidential debate. He said, hate speech and misinformation are not protected by the First Amendment. And that's actually not true. The Supreme Court has never carved out an exception to free speech for hate speech and misinformation. And when stuff is not unprotected, it is protected by the First Amendment of the Constitution. It just is. The Supreme Court has carved out exceptions like obscenity, that there's the Miller test for determining obscenity, fighting words, all sorts of, issues like libel, defamation, slander, untrue statements that harm someone's reputation. So those things are unprotected, but hate speech, misinformation, they are, and I'm not saying they should be protected or shouldn't be. I'm not weighing in on it. I'm just giving a descriptive point. They are protected. And so when Tim Walz said that was false, and Joe Rogan didn't point that out. He had a good opportunity to point that out. He just goes after all the wrong things. He gets his panties in a twist over Tim Walz and some possibly not true statements, but doesn't care about any of Trump's lies, which is absolutely just unforgivable. And it's evidence that yes, he is evil, because he did not have his head in the sand during Trump's first term. He did not have his head in the sand during Trump's first term. There's no way. He talked about stuff going on during Trump's first term. He criticized that. He criticized some of the stuff Trump did on immigration back then. He's criticizing it now, but it seems a bit too little too late. So we know that he knew that Trump was a massive liar. And for him to come around in the 2024 election and be like, Tim Walz is such a liar, I had to vote for Trump because of him. It's like, wow, you are a propagandist. You are just ignoring Trump's lies. You know damn well he's a liar, that he's the worst liar in American politics, potentially, at least modern American politics. And yet you're like, oh, I have a problem with Tim Walz and his lies, his record with the truth. It's totally absurd. Now, we also have to talk about, okay, is it not so much evil, but just, a product of where he's at? He moved to Texas, apparently. Texas is a red state. No matter how much Republicans are afraid of it going blue due to demographic change or whatever, or no matter how much Democrats think that, we can flip it this time. Texas it's tough. It's tough to flip blue, I gotta say. It hasn't gone blue since 1976. But yeah, Joe Rogan goes there, and all of a sudden he's hanging out with this different crowd, this more Republican crowd. And it's like, yeah, sometimes the low IQ stuff, it might just rub off on him there, basically, and make him be like, oh yeah, no, duh, government bad, no, establishment bad, me no like vaccine, me no believe in climate change, all this stuff where it's like, look, you can have those opinions. That's fine. But when you base those opinions on just, a total rejection of science and just a total rejection of any sort of empirical reasoning, you're going to show your ass, really. You're going to show your ass. And that's what he did. That's what he did in his debate with Bernie Sanders. And I say debate because, even though it technically wasn't a debate, he was trying to fight him, and Bernie Sanders destroyed him. But yeah, he did very poorly. And now all of a sudden, and this is where I'm like, okay, maybe he's stupid. The immigration thing. He's like, the ICE is being really mean to immigrants. I saw this video of them raiding this place and it was really bad, and oh no. And it's like, now wait just a minute. As Sam Cedar pointed out, Trump wore it on his sleeve that he was going to be tough on immigration. There were these signs at Trump rallies and the Republican National Convention and every other Republican event and every single town with at least one Republican in it, every single city with at least one Republican in it. You could find some stuff like, mass deportation now, everywhere. Everywhere that there was a Republican, they were like, yeah, mass deportation now. They were so fired up over immigration. They would not move an inch on immigration. They were so obsessed with that issue, more so than high prices, potentially, even though high prices might have been the thing that helped Trump win the election. They were so obsessed with that. Leading up to the election. Trump was so obsessed with it. Trump has been obsessed with it after he got elected. And now all of a sudden you're saying, oh my God, this is uncouth, this is unhinged. I can't believe what the Trump administration is doing on immigration. Oh, alligator Alcatraz, he might have people get hurt by big, mean alligator. They might get bit by gator or snake. Wow, that's really cruel. Dude, we have been saying since term one, the cruelty is the point when it comes to immigration. Now, Joe Rogan, of course, he had the balls to criticize Trump's poor immigration policy during his first term. He criticized that. He criticized it as cruel. And he said, yeah, you know what? If you don't think it's cruel, if you think it's okay, then shame on you. You suck. My words, not his. But he was unequivocal against people who think that Trump's first term, immigration policy was acceptable. So yeah, then he goes and has this honeymoon phase with Trump in the 2024 election, brings him on, kisses his butt on his show, kisses J.D. Vance's butt on his show, and now it's immigration he's taking an issue with. Some people have pointed out, okay, he wants to get off the Trump train. He realizes it's an optical disaster because Trump's presidency is horrific so far, and it probably will continue to get worse at a pretty rapid rate. We are almost 1/8 through his presidency, thereabouts. So yeah, he needs an off-ramp. But this is what makes me think, okay, maybe he's stupid, is if he wants an off-ramp, why would he choose immigration to be his off-ramp? Where it's like, oh no, I backed Trump and now I regret it and it's going to be bad for my brand, and Trump is toxic, his approval rating is going to be 4% by the end of this term. Probably not. But yeah, he's probably nervous. And so it's like, why not take issue with stuff like, we're going to make Canada our 51st state. 51st state Canada, like really, that's no US president has ever said that. That's just totally unhinged nonsense. And it got Mark Carney elected in Canada. Mark Carney, the liberal, beating Pierre Poilievre, the conservative. So Joe, you could have taken issue with that. That is just ridiculous. The Greenland stuff, the Panama stuff. We want to take back the Panama Canal. We want to take Greenland. We want to take Greenland from Denmark, possibly using military force. He said that, and Joe Rogan didn't bring that up. So if he really wanted to get off the Trump train in an intelligible way, he could have picked that stuff. But he was like, yeah, no, immigration, that's the problem. I don't know if he's just so stupid or if he actually like deliberately ignored that other stuff because he was like, yeah, I want to test the waters. And then all these MAGA nut jobs were like, yeah, no, let's take Greenland. Let's take Panama Canal. Let's take Canada, whatever, And some of them, maybe they weren't being serious, to be fair. They were just memeing it up. But the job of the president, as I say, is not to be a stand-up comedian, not to be a meme generator. It's to be the president. It's to be the leader. It's to be the commander-in-chief. Generally you want to be a normal person. You can make jokes. You can have good comedic timing. Sometimes Trump does make good, normal jokes that are actually not super offensive. And it's like, whatever, that's, past presidents have done that. But these days it's very hard to tell what's an edgy joke or like actually a serious policy plan that's going to be disgusting and have horrible real world consequences because Trump, something's wrong with his brain. But Joe Rogan is like, oh, the immigration stuff, this ICE stuff. Oh, they kicked someone out of college for criticizing Israel. Dude, Trump has historically been the biggest Israel simp. Historically, worse than other Republicans even. Him and RFK Jr. are right up there as some of the biggest Israel simps. Democrats who are pro-Israel, like Joe Biden, look at Trump and they go, my God, what an Israel simp. This is ridiculous. So you knew what you were getting yourself into. You cannot pretend that you did not. This is different from someone like Ben Shapiro, who has talked about, oh, Trump's tariffs are problematic. They're hurting the stock market. Ben Shapiro said, oh, I think the tariffs are bad. And I don't like that Trump campaigned on them, but I'm still going to vote for him, and I'm still going to support him, but I'll criticize him on tariffs. It's like, that's a policy issue. But Joe Rogan is just like flipping around where he's like, it'll be really cool to elect Trump, bro, because he's anti-establishment, and I'm just not going to talk about immigration. He didn't talk about immigration in the 2024 election. And now, all of a sudden, after Trump campaigned on immigration and his supporters supported him in part because of immigration, he's going in there and doing these ICE raids and violating due process. Now Joe Rogan chooses to be upset about immigration. What on earth? So it's crazy. I've told this story of Joe Rogan here where it's like he's weaved in and out between stupid and evil and stupid and evil. I think at the end of the day, we can conclude that most people who back Trump are not good people at all. They do lack intelligence generally. But Joe Rogan, I mean, yeah, he's a tough nut to crack. I'm not saying every single Trump supporter is just pure evil or every single Trump supporter is just plain stupid. I think Joe Rogan, though, he really illustrates sort of the issue with, low information voting, not thinking things through, trying too hard to seem cool. People like him are sometimes credited too with helping Trump win over young men. Kamala Harris won young people overall. Make no mistake about it. But Trump did better with young men than previous Republicans have, or than Trump himself previously has. 2024 was his best election performance yet. So, Joe Rogan, yeah, it's weird that young men would look at, Rogan and Trump talking together and be like, oh, that appeals to me so much, and not even paying attention to the substance of what they're saying, just being like, oh, Trump seems normal and cool. Look at him talking with Joe Rogan, the alpha male, the big buffed, Giga Chad Joe Rogan. What a great guy. Yeah, no, that guy tells it like it is. He previously endorsed Bernie Sanders, so he must be anti-establishment, and now he's endorsing Trump. Okay, horseshoe, whatever. And it's like, you can't just go from endorsing Bernie Sanders in 2019 to Donald Trump in 2024. That's totally not feasible at all. People have not come to terms with how stupid that is. And again, this plays into the evidence of Joe Rogan being stupid. Joe Rogan should understand that Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump are almost exactly opposites on every single issue. One possible exception is immigration, where, and Bernie Sanders, again, is very different from Trump, but Bernie Sanders is not, super like, lax on the border. He gave Trump credit before for supposedly securing the border and being tougher on the border, but he strongly opposes the due process violations and these ICE raids. So make no mistake, none of the Democrats are on board with Trump's ridiculous immigration agenda, except maybe John Fetterman. That's another story. He said, it's outrageous to support abolishing ICE. But yeah, Bernie Sanders is as different can be from Trump. Joe Rogan should have understood that. You can't just go from supporting him in 2019 to Trump in 2024. Not to mention, in the middle of all that, 2022, 2023, Joe Rogan is like, I'd vote for Ron DeSantis. Now, Ron DeSantis doesn't quite have the same outsider appeal as Trump. Ron DeSantis is a bit more put together, definitely higher IQ than Trump. This is a guy who went to Ivy League law school. He's a little bit socially awkward, and he doesn't have the social skills of Donald Trump, I would say. He doesn't have the ability to rizz up a crowd, but I wouldn't argue that he's completely void of charisma. I don't know if I'd go that far. He had an ability to kind of, rile up the anti-woke types. And Joe Rogan, he's very anti-woke, or at least he's become that way over the past couple years. And this is where I wonder, okay, is he just evil? Is he just clinging onto the anti-woke stuff to be like, yeah, this is my excuse to go full right wing? That is a really concerning thing, is when people who are otherwise left wing, they might be hardcore into fighting climate change, hardcore in favor of universal health care or a public option, strong supporters of unions and raising the minimum wage to something, better, something that keeps up with inflation. And then all of a sudden these people come along and go, DEI is so bad. White, straight, cisgender men are so oppressed. Women are bad. Transgenders are bad. Me no like DEI. Me no like critical race theory. And these people go, yo, that's really cool, bro. I really like that. Yeah, no, wokeness is bad. We gotta stop wokeness at all costs. And they do mean at all costs, because they abandon all their principles to join in the anti-woke brigade. That is really concerning. Is Joe Rogan, he might have been looking for an opportunity to abandon the left. And he was like, oh, this anti-woke stuff is a good vehicle. It's a good vehicle to go and you just join the far right, and mix a little bit of the COVID stuff in there, him complaining about, masks and vaccines and stuff like that, and promoting ivermectin. That is like the recipe for him just going, yeah, I'm far right now, although he's not saying he's far right. He says he's just an American. He's not a Republican or a Democrat, but he's functioning as a far right propagandist. There can be no mistake about it. Many political analysts do agree that he's functioning as a far right propagandist. So yeah, the anti-woke grift is pretty tiring. And it's evidence of him being evil rather than stupid. I do think that some people who fall for the anti-woke grift are stupid, but I think some of them, Jimmy Dore is a good example of this, where he's like, okay, yeah, no, I don't like the left anymore because they got too woke. He goes after wokeness and stuff. And it's like, it's funny, you go after woke leftists harder than you ever go after anyone on the right. So I think, yeah, when these people just look for an excuse to abandon the left and join the right, that's really problematic. And the question is too, like, why do they want to join the right? Why do they want to have an excuse to vote Republican? Is it just for fun? That's like, no, it's probably not that. It's probably because they want a tax cut. They want a tax cut. Donald Trump is offering it. His big, beautiful bill is going to cut taxes for the top 1%. He did a bill that cut taxes for the top 1% in his first term as well in December 2017. So they know the score. They know the score. Donald Trump is looking out for the bottom line of nobody except for the uber wealthy. Joe Rogan is among the uber wealthy. And so he might have just been looking for a tax cut. You know, he's in his 50s. At some point, you should just settle, you know, be like, okay, this is my political ideology. I'm not just going to swing around nonstop, just like a ping pong ball or whatever across sides of the table, you know. And if that's what he's doing, Bernie Sanders is the man. And then in 2022, he's like, Ron DeSantis is the man. And then in 2024, he's like, Donald Trump is the man. And now all of a sudden, the issue that Donald Trump put possibly at the forefront of his campaign, if not second to the forefront, immigration, is an issue where he's going, oh, wow, this is really bad. I don't know about this. It's a little mean-spirited and cruel. We have known this since 2017. We've arguably known it since 2015 when he started his campaign by talking about how people who come across the Mexican border are rapists and murderers and drug dealers. Joe, really, you can't feign concern about this. And it really does seem like feigning concern is what he's doing. So I have come to the conclusion that Joe Rogan is 56% evil, 44% stupid. That adds up. Let me know what you think the percentages are, but at this point, I think he's more evil than stupid. I'm sorry to say for those of you who wanted to think Joe Rogan was smart, but he's more, he's got a lot of stupidity in him, but yeah, the evil just happens to predominate. But don't worry, he's plenty stupid, but he's got a lot of evil in there. Let me know what you think the percentages are in the comments below. Like, comment, or subscribe to the channel. Let me know what you think of my analysis. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to speaking to you in my next video.